how's it going? Welcome back to another episode of the Usagi Podjimbo podcast. I'm your host, Mike, and we're looking to talk about some more Usagi Podjimbo. Hope you guys enjoyed the last episode, which was A Mother's Love. A little depressing, if I do say so myself. But this one, we got a good one. We got a returning character of the Blind Swords Pig, Zata, and that's the issue we're looking at today, which is called The Return of the Blind Swords Pig. I just gotta say, after reading the first Zatu adventure, this one's just as good in my opinion. But it reminded me of this movie that I watched when I was a child. I think it was called Blind Fury, might have been the name of it. It was about this guy who I don't remember what he goes on search of, but it's like a white guy, I think it was, and he's blind and he has a stick sword just like Zatuino. I vividly remember uh, parts of this particular movie, which kind of reminded me of this comic that we're going to be talking about today. But, anyways, I'll try to track down that movie and see if I can find it. But we'll have to go from there. But anyways, guys, hope you guys enjoy this. And as always, rate and review the podcast on your podcast platform. Write us a 5-star review. We'll read it on the podcast. Make sure to tell your friends about our podcast. But without further ado, let's get into this episode and have some fun talking about the Ronin Rabbit, Usagi Yojimbo. Well, more like the Blind Swords Pig this time, right? So our story starts out with a very familiar face, Zatuino, the legendary swordsman who is the blind swords pig, who is looking for a place to call his own, a peaceful place where he can just settle down, relax, and just live his life. And he's walking through the countryside, trying to get to his next destination. He's talking about like the environment he is smelling because he is now at a bigger disadvantage. Because if you don't remember from last time, Zatu, got his snout cut off by Usagi in their very first battle. As Zatu, is going about his day, he actually comes upon some bandits, not bandits, but like more like bounty hunters, I guess you could say, who are looking for him to collect the bounty on his head. And then I didn't notice this before, but there's a little Tokage at the beginning of this who we will actually we'll come to find out is a very little important Tokage who is actually Spot, Usagi's traveling companion. But I didn't notice that he was on the front or on this full page where you see the bounty hunters like looking and hiding behind some trees, and he's like, what's going on here? He's like, eek, eek, eek. And Spot actually comes to his aid, and he's like, sniff, snort, sniff, snort. Yes, I sense them now. Thank you, creature. I sense them skulking around, and everybody's like, quick, our ambush is revealed. We got to kill the outlaw quickly. And all these these bounty hunters charge at and he just says one word. He says, die. And that's what they do. They all die because Zatu, takes them out in this beautiful panel. Very similar to whenever like Usagi gets like bum rushed, it seems like very similar. Um, but Spot and are fighting their way through these unsavory bounty hunters, and he says, "Oh, look, there's 5 or 6 of them," and I would have been caught unaware if it wasn't for you, obviously. And he's like, "Oh, thank you, thank you for helping me out. In this situation, how about me and you become traveling friends and companions? I want to find a place of peace where I can live, because obviously, that's what he wants. That's what he wants in life. It's just be left alone." And he's talking to him, telling Spot about his dream, and he turns around, and Spot's nowhere to be found. Spot is gone. He left, and you see kind of walk off. That stupid lizard, freaking ridiculous. Good riddance. He talks to him, and we transition from that over to Usagi. He is at uh like a rest stop kind of thing, sipping some tea, and Spot shows up, and he's like, "Oh, hey, where have you been? I was just about to leave, and I didn't want to leave you behind. Good, you actually showed up and stuff, and you seem very reluctant to leave whenever we get to a new place. Maybe that's because uh, lived in a town for so long and stuff like that. But maybe what you really want is to settle down somewhere peaceful and permanently, which actually leads into part of this story. So we get that, and then we transition from they end up leaving and going off on their journey to. I can't remember where they're going. Oh yeah, they're going. I think they're going back to Usagi's hometown, but I can't remember off the top of my head, to be honest. I couldn't remember. But Eno shows up, and he's like, he's sniffing. He's like, "Oh, boiled rice, fish, pickled vegetables. Oh, it's an inn. Innkeeper, can I have some lunch and tea?" And yeah, they're like, "Oh yeah, yeah, you can have some." And you see him sit it down for some tea, and is sniffing and sucking down this tea, and he smells a familiar smell, a smell that he hadn't smelled in quite a while. He actually smells Usagi. And he's like, "Oh, Usagi was here. I can smell his scent anywhere." And you see him go back to his previous encounter with Usagi. We get a little flashback, and he's like, that's the one who cut off my snout. And we see what actually happened. And he's like, "Innkeeper, where's the Ronin that was here?" And he's like, what are you talking about? He's like, "Oh, I think he went to the abandoned temple down the road for a bit. If you leave now, you can find him," he says. And definitely Zatu has a mission on his hands that he is going to complete. And he basically says one of us will die tonight, which is very foreboding to what's actually about to happen, to say the least. But Usagi and Spot actually get to the inn. Now it is nighttime, and you see Usagi's like, "Oh yeah, the innkeeper was right. There is a old rundown abandoned place. This is a good place to spend the night." And we see Spot go off, and Usagi's like, "Don't forget, we're gonna be leaving in the morning." And Usagi starts to question whether or not uh, Spot has been strangely uneasy of late, and he wonders exactly what is going about. He's wondering if he's missing the security that he once had, because Usagi is traveling the world that he's in at the moment. And Usagi is sleeping in this temple, and he gets awakened by a noise. He's like, "Oh, Spot!" And he goes to grab for his sword. He's like, "Who's there? Who's there? Show yourself." And he's like, "Greetings, Miyamoto Usagi. It's been a long time, but you surely remember and recognize me, don't you?" And you hear Zata Ino, and he comes in, and he's like, "Yes, I am back, Usagi, just as I promised I would be." And Usagi's like, "Look," he's like, "Oh, you got a new nose." And this is where we get kind of a funny joke in a somewhat tense situation. And because Zatuino says, "Yes, aha, it's made out of wood. It's a transplant." And he kind of chuckles and laughs, which is kind of funny to think about. It's such a corny joke, but it honestly made me laugh when I read it the first time. Um, which it's funny. And you see them, and Usagi is standing off with Zatuino, and he's like, "I don't want to hurt you. We can still be friends." And Zatuino says, friends are a handicap, more crippling than the blindness. I need no one. It's revenge that I want. And Usagi is basically like, "Look, I never wanted to do this to you. We can still, we don't have to do this." And he's like, Zatuya says, "It's because I was a superior swordsman, and you did this to me to basically cripple me, and you wanted to be the best swordsman, basically. And I spared you before. I won't do it again. He says that's what Usagi says. Because Usagi thought he was doing the right thing at the time, but it looks like, unfortunately, he wasn't really doing that. He just made an enemy of somebody who it was. I think it was like very much a series of unfortunate events that happened. Usagi did what he did uh, to basically take a somewhat bad person off the streets and stop them from killing. I mean, it's a big whole misunderstanding when you actually get into Zatuino's story and learn more about him. He didn't mean to kill the person, but he ends up in a life of killing people. But he really doesn't want that exactly. But we get this cool scene where Zatuino takes out his sword, slashes and cuts the wick of the candle. He's like, "Ha! Now we're both blind." And you see them having this like standoff, and he's like, "Yeah, he's right. We are blind, and I am at a disadvantage." Usagi says, and he will take some time to adapt to the situation at hand. And Zatuino just goes in for this and basically goes hog wild on him, pun intended, where they're fighting in the dark. And Zatuino definitely does have the advantage. And, he is actually impressed by what Usagi is able to keep up. And since his thrusting and swinging of his sword, and we see Usagi dodging the blades, and we get this really, really cool scene where it's a full page, but each panel is broken up in a grid where Usagi and Zatuino are fighting, and it's a very vicious fight. At one point, Zatuino actually does get a hit on Usagi and cuts him across the face, and it's just a very vicious fight. And um, Zatuino definitely has a one up in this scenario with Usagi, because Usagi ends up getting kicked to the floor and kicked back, and he uh, Zatuino definitely is at the advantage. But who comes in? Spot. Spot comes in, and to save the day between Usagi and Zatuino, and Ino's like, "Get out of the way, I don't want to hurt you, uh, why do you protect him?" He asks Spot, and Usagi is basically like, "Yeah, get out of the way. Do what he says. Stand down. We don't want you to be a part of this and get hurt." So they're both on this kind of same page at this point, and he asks, "How do you know this Ronin?" To Kage, how do you know this person? And Usagi says he's my friend. He's my traveling companion. And he's like, your friend." And you see Zatuino stop, puts his sword away, and he's like, "The lizard warned me of an ambush earlier. He saved my life. I wanted him to accompany me on my search for peace." And he's like, "I owe him a life, so I will trade what he did for me, and I will pay it forward. And you are basically not going to die today." So he leaves, and he's like, "You don't realize what a treasure you truly have, Usagi." And you see Spot kind of go a little ways towards the door, and he starts to whimper and cry. And Usagi, says, "I know what you're thinking. You really want to help Ino, and Ino wants to help seeking peace." So he basically says goodbye to his friend Spot, which is a very, I'm not gonna lie, it's a very sad scene. I mean, they've only been traveling together for a couple issues now, but I feel like they definitely have a bond and a friendship that they've developed over these past couple adventures that they've had. Then we see walking away, trying to find his way, and Spot shows up, and he's like, "Okay, yeah, we will travel together." So Spot goes off with Zatuino, and you see Usagi say, "Have a good life, both of you." So he really does want the best for Spot and Zatuino, which is a very commendable thing for Usagi to do. He didn't want to. He doesn't want to really hurt or kill anybody if he has to. He very much has that code that he lives by, and he didn't want to hurt Ino, but he felt like it was the last resort the first time that they met to basically stop him from his ways of killing and stuff like that. Because deep down, I feel like Ino isn't a bad character or a bad guy or a villain in this situation. To be honest, I mean, he kind of is a little bit in this one because he does go, but he's very much an honorable, misunderstood character. Uh, that it's really cool to actually see him again, and we do get more character development from Eno, and it's cool to see his story progress. And if I remember correctly, he does show up in the next volume, to be exact. But this issue was really good. I liked it a lot more than the last issue. I thought the last issue was a little bit slower than this one. This one moved definitely at a brisker pace. The rivalry between Eno and I don't want to say it would be like a rivalry, but like the way Eno and Usagi feel with each other are very polarizing. Like Eno really definitely does hate Usagi, but he has that honorable side to him to where he's gonna fight and kill Usagi, but he's gonna do it in an honorable way. And he basically lets Usagi go because of what Spot did. And I don't know. I really feel like they have a very complicated history, and Usagi do, because one seeks revenge and one just wants to be his fucking friend. Like, come on, Zatu Ino. But yeah, this one was a really good issue. I like the fact that we do get like until recently, I don't think Usagi has really very much struggled, other than his fight with Zatu Ino, like these two fights, with anybody else in his Ronin samurai journey up to this point. And it's really interesting to see how he goes about dealing with this situation that he basically made for himself by chopping off Zatuino's snout, and he has to live with those consequences of his actions because he basically crippled a cripple. He's basically thought he was doing the right thing, but in reality, he wasn't doing the right thing um, to some extent. But I re- I know Spot and Zatuino do come back, so when I get to that point in the story, which is soon actually, because after these couple issues wrap up, we'll get to a big overarching story, which is the Dragon Below conspiracy, which is a big overarching story with like Tomoe and Zatuino and Genichi and stuff like that. But this one's good. It was a very tense story as well, because you didn't really know what was going to happen between them, because Usagi was definitely at a disadvantage at times in this story because he was caught off guard, in the middle of the night and stuff like that. I really love again how Stan Sakai portrays all these different layers. Like nobody's ever really some people are some people are bad, obviously, but you have these layers, these morally gray areas as to where who's actually good and who's actually bad. And I feel like Zatu, himself is a very, very sympathetic character. And I loved this whole fight between them. I was like blown away, like, oh my God. Like just looking at it, which I kind of want to go back and look at it in its original format because I have the colored edition and I really want to check and see how um, the the original version looks, the black and white version, because the color version is beautiful. I'm pretty sure the black and white version is just as beautiful as it is. Seeing all the different techniques that he uses and stuff like that, especially with all the black and the shading in that scene where they're fighting in the dark. It's very good, and I definitely recommend anybody check this out if they're interested in checking it out. And as always, go read some Usagi Yojimbo. It's definitely worth your time and checking out. This was definitely a very, very good issue. Definitely recommend it. It's a very good companion piece to the Blind Swords Pig issue, and it's fucking amazing to say the least. But if you have any comments, concerns, anything like that, you can reach out to me on Usagi Pod on Usagi Podjimbo on Twitter and Instagram, and I have a Facebook page, and sometimes I'm on the Usagi Facebook page for the Usagi fandom page as well. And make sure to go check out my other podcast called Otakuology. I'll leave a link down below. We talk about anime, manga. A friend of mine, we talk about anime, manga, comics, stuff like that, movies, a bunch of very nerdy stuff. Go check it out. And if you would, please take some time, rate and review us on your favorite podcast where you listen to this podcast. Tell your friends. Tell your friends. It's the best way to help out and share the podcast. And yeah, let me know what you think. How can I improve the podcast and stuff like that? Thanks for listening. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode. Stay safe. Read some comics.